in the rain-soaked shadows of Ashford Manor. A priceless crimson umbrella adorned with rubies and hiding a secret will vanishes, sparking suspicion and betrayal. Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, unravels a web of clues: a rare orchid petal, a crimson thread, a hidden key, and a ruby meant to frame an innocent. As secrets unravel among a desperate gambler, a secretive doctor, and a loyal gardener, Poirot sets a trap to catch the thief. In a dramatic showdown, he restores order, revealing the truth behind the umbrella's theft. Will justice prevail, or will the manor's secrets remain buried? Chapter 1. The rainy evening. The rain descended upon London with a ferocity that seemed to challenge the very order of the universe. It fell in sheets, transforming the cobblestone streets into glistening rivers and shrouding the gas lamps in a misty haze. Through this deluge moved a figure of singular precision, undeterred by the storm's chaos. Hercule Poirot, his small frame clad in an immaculate overcoat, stepped lightly along the pavement, his silver-topped walking stick tapping a steady rhythm against the wet stone. His hat, tilted at precisely the correct angle, shielded his meticulously waxed mustache, and his patent leather shoes, miraculously untouched by the puddles, gleamed faintly in the lamplight. To the casual observer, he might have appeared as a mere dandy, but to those who knew him, Hercule Poirot was a man whose fastidious exterior concealed a mind as sharp as a razor dot, pausing beneath the awning of the Ritz Hotel. Poirot shook the rain from his coat with a flick of his wrist, as though dismissing an impudent subordinate. The doorman, recognizing the diminutive Belgian detective, offered a respectful nod and swung open the heavy glass door. A wave of warmth enveloped Poirot as he entered the opulent lobby, where chandeliers cast a golden glow over marble floors and plush velvet chairs. The air was alive with the murmur of conversation, the clink of crystal, and the soft strains of a piano drifting from the lounge. Poirot's green eyes surveyed the scene with approval. Here was order, symmetry, and elegance, the very qualities that soothed his methodical soul. He handed his hat and stick to an attendant and made his way to the lounge, where his old friend, Captain Arthur Hastings, awaited. Hastings sat by a roaring fire, a glass of whiskey cradled in his hand, his weathered yet boyishly earnest face breaking into a grin as he spotted Poirot. "Hercule, old chap," he exclaimed, rising with a vigor that belied his years. "You're a sight for sore eyes on a night like this. How you manage to look as though you've just stepped out of a tailor's shop, I'll never know." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Mon ami," he said, his voice carrying the faint lilt of his native French. "The weather may be a disorderly beast, but Hercule Poirot is its master. A man must maintain his dignity, n'est-ce pas? Now, sit, sit. I see you have fortified yourself against the chill. Tell me, what is this urgent matter that brings us together?" Hastings resumed his seat, gesturing for Poirot to join him. The firelight danced across his features, highlighting the lines of concern that creased his forehead. "It's a queer business, Poirot," he began, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial murmur. "My cousin, Margaret Langley, has got herself into a bit of a pickle. She's been accused of something rather serious, stealing, if you can believe it. And not just any trifle, but a priceless heirloom. A crimson umbrella, of all things, belonging to her employer, Lady Beatrice Ashford." Poirot's eyebrows arched a subtle movement that conveyed both surprise and intrigue. "An umbrella," he repeated, settling into the chair opposite Hastings. "This is most unusual, Hastings. An umbrella, you say, and crimson. Tell me everything from the beginning." Omit no detail, for in the smallest thread we may find the pattern of the truth. Hastings took a sip of his whiskey, gathering his thoughts. Well, it all started about a week ago, he said. Margaret's been working as a companion to Lady Beatrice for nearly a year now. You know the sort of thing, reading to her, arranging her social engagements, helping with correspondence. Lady Beatrice is a widow, lives in a grand old pile called Ashford Manor, just outside London. She's a bit of a dragon, from what Margaret says, but fair enough in her way. This umbrella, though it's not just any umbrella, it's a family heirloom, passed down from Sir Henry Ashford, Lady Beatrice's late husband. The handles, studded with rubies, and the silk canopies embroidered with gold thread, worth a fortune, apparently. Poirot leaned forward, his fingers steepled before him. And this umbrella, it has been stolen. When, and under what circumstances? 2 nights ago, Hastings replied, his voice tinged with urgency. Margaret says she was with Lady Beatrice in the conservatory at the manor. It was raining, naturally, and Lady Beatrice wanted to inspect her orchids. Margaret carried the umbrella to shield her from the drizzle as they crossed the garden. She swears she left it by the conservatory door when they went inside, but when she went back for it later, it was gone, vanished, just like that. Lady Beatrice is convinced Margaret took it, and she's threatening to call the police unless it's returned. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind already turning over the facts like a jeweller examining a gem. And Mademoiselle Langley, she denies this accusation? Emphatically, Hastings said, his voice firm with loyalty. Margaret's not the sort to steal Poirot. She's a good girl, honest as the day is long, but Lady Beatrice won't hear of it. She's got it into her head that Margaret's been planning to make off with the thing for months. Says she's been acting shifty, whatever that means. Poirot tapped his fingers lightly on the arm of his chair, a rhythm as precise as a metronome. This Lady Beatrice, she is a woman of strong opinions. We, and the household, who else resides at Ashford Manor? We must know the cast of characters. Hastings, for a theft such as this, is rarely the work of a single hand. Hastings nodded, his expression growing thoughtful. There's Gerald Ashford, Lady Beatrice's nephew. He's in his 30s, bit of a wastrel. From what I hear, likes the horses and the card tables a bit too much. Then there's Clara Vernon, Lady Beatrice's ward. She's a young woman, early 20s, I'd say, and quite the beauty, though. Margaret says she's got a sharp tongue. And there's Dr. Simon Ridgway, the family physician. He's been with the Ashfords for years, lives in a cottage on the estate. That's the lot, I think, aside from the servants. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. A small but intriguing ensemble. And the umbrella, it was kept where? In a safe, perhaps, given its value. That's the odd thing, Hastings said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Margaret says it was always kept in a stand, in the hall, right by the front door. Anyone could have taken it, really. But Lady Beatrice insists Margaret's the only one who handled it that night. Most curious, Poirot murmured, his gaze drifting to the fire as though it might reveal the answer in its flickering depths. An umbrella, so valuable, yet left in plain sight. And this accusation against your cousin, it feels too neat, too convenient. Tell me, Hastings, what is your impression of this Lady Beatrice? Is she a woman who sees clearly, or one who allows her emotions to cloud her judgment? Hastings hesitated, his brow furrowing. Margaret says she's sharp as a tack, but proud. Doesn't like to be crossed. I met her once, years ago, at a garden party, and I'd say she's the sort who'd rather die than admit she was wrong. Mind you, she's got a reputation for being fair, but she's not one to suffer fools gladly." Poirot nodded, his fingers still tapping their precise rhythm. "And Mademoiselle Langley, what is her disposition? Is she a woman of courage, or does she bend easily under pressure?" "She's steady enough," Hastings replied, his voice warming with affection. "Not one to panic, but she's young, Poirot barely 25, and this business has shaken her. She wrote to me in a right state, begging for help. That's why I thought of you." Poirot's smile deepened, though his eyes remained sharp. "You did well to call upon Hercule Poirot, mon ami. This case, it intrigues me. An umbrella of such value, yet treated with such nonchalance. A theft that points too readily to one person. There is a puzzle here, and the little grey cells, they are already at work." He paused, his gaze returning to Hastings. "Tell me more of this conservatory. What is it like? Who has access to it? And this garden they crossed, what lies beyond it?" Hastings leaned back, picturing the scene as Margaret had described it in her letter. The conservatory is a glass-walled affair, attached to the manor's south side, full of exotic plants, orchids mostly, that Lady Beatrice fusses over like children. It's got a tiled floor, a few wicker chairs, and a door leading to the garden. The garden itself is formal hedges, gravel paths, a fountain in the middle. Beyond that, there's a hothouse where they keep the rarer plants. And then the estate stretches out to a copse of trees and a small lake. As for access, the conservatory is not locked during the day, and the servants come and go to tend the plants. At night, though, it's usually just the family. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And this hothouse, it is separate from the conservatory?" "Yes. A good 50 yards away, across the garden," Hastings said. "Margaret mentioned it's kept locked, with only Lady Beatrice and the gardener, a fellow named Bates, having keys." "Curio," Poirot murmured, his fingers pausing in their rhythm. "And the servants, what do we know of them? A household such as this must have a butler, a housekeeper, perhaps a maid or two." Hastings nodded. "There's Mr. Grayson. The butler been with the family for decades, by all accounts. Mrs. Whittaker, the housekeeper, runs the place like a general. Then there's a couple of maids, a cook, and a footman. But Margaret didn't mention their names. Oh, and Bates, the gardener, who's apparently a bit of a recluse." Poirot's expression grew contemplative. A household of many eyes, yet none saw the theft. Or perhaps, he added, his voice dropping, someone saw more than they admit. "Tell me, Hastings, has Margaret spoken of any tensions in the household? Any rivalries, jealousies, or secrets?" Hastings frowned, trying to recall his cousin's letters. "She's mentioned Clara Vernon can be a bit high-handed, treats her like a servant sometimes. Gerald, the nephew, is always short of money, which makes him moody. Dr. Ridgway keeps to himself, mostly, but Margaret says he's devoted to Lady Beatrice. Nothing specific, though no rows or scandals, if that's what you mean." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Sometimes, mon ami, it is the absence of scandal that hides the greatest secrets. Now, let us consider the umbrella itself. You say it is studded with rubies and embroidered with gold thread. Is there anything else that makes it unique? A monogram, perhaps, or an unusual design?" Hastings shook his head. "Margaret didn't say, but she described it as a work of art. Sir Henry had it made in Paris, apparently as a gift for Lady Beatrice when they married. It's not just the value, she says. Lady Beatrice treasures it for sentimental reasons." "Sentiment," Poirot repeated softly, as though tasting the word. A powerful motive, Hastings, and one that often clouds the truth. Very well, I will take this case. Tomorrow we shall visit Ashford Manor and meet this Lady Beatrice and her household. The little grey cells, they are already stirring, and they tell me there is more to this crimson umbrella than meets the eye. Hastings let out a breath, relief evident in his posture. I knew you'd help, Poirot. Margaret will be over the moon. But, I say, what makes you so sure there's more to it? It could just be a simple theft, couldn't it? Poirot's eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief. Simple, Hastings. Nan. Nothing is simple when Hercule Poirot is involved. A theft so bold, yet so poorly concealed. An accusation so swift, yet so lacking in proof. No, mon ami, there is a pattern here, hidden in the folds of that crimson silk, and Hercule Poirot will find it. He rose, smoothing his coat with a practiced hand. Come, let us finish our drinks and prepare for tomorrow. The rain may fall, but the truth, it will shine through. The fire crackled as they sat in companionable silence, the storm outside a distant rumble. Poirot's mind, however, was far from idle, already weaving the threads of the case into a tapestry only he could. See, the crimson umbrella, with its rubies and gold, was more than an heirloom, it was a key, and he would unlock its secrets. Chapter 2. The Ashford household. The morning broke over London with a sullen reluctance. The rain of the previous night giving way to a heavy mist that clung to the streets like a mourner's veil. Hercule Poirot, impeccable in a charcoal suit and polished shoes, sat opposite Hastings in a chauffeured car as it wound its way through the city's outskirts toward Ashford Manor. The vehicle, a sleek Daimler, hummed softly, its interior a haven of leather and quiet efficiency. Poirot's fingers rested lightly on his silver-topped walking stick, his eyes fixed on the passing landscape fields, now emerging from the fog, their green muted by the grey dawn. Mon ami, Poirot said, breaking the silence, you are pensive this morning. Is it the fate of your cousin that weighs upon you, or the mystery of this crimson umbrella? Hastings, who had been staring out the window, turned with a faint smile. A bit of both, I suppose. Margaret's letter was so full of panic, Poirot. She's not one to exaggerate, and yet I can't help feeling there's something she's not telling me. And that umbrella, would anyone steal something so conspicuous? Poirot's lips curved into a knowing smile. Conspicuous, oui, and that is precisely what intrigues me. A thief who takes such an item does not act from impulse alone. There is purpose, Hastings, and perhaps a message. We shall see what this Ashford Manor reveals. The car turned onto a gravel drive, flanked by ancient oaks whose branches formed a dripping canopy overhead. Ashford Manor loomed into view, a Georgian masterpiece of honey-coloured stone, its tall windows glinting faintly in the mist. The house exuded an air of timeless authority, its symmetry marred only by the sprawling conservatory that jutted from its southern wing like an afterthought of glass and iron. Poirot noted the manicured lawns, the clipped hedges, and the faint outline of a hothouse in the distance. Half hidden by the fog, the car drew to a halt before the grand entrance, where a butler, his bearing as rigid as the columns framing the door, awaited them. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, he said, his voice a measured baritone. I am Grayson, the butler. Lady Beatrice is expecting you in the drawing-room. Poirot inclined his head. Merci, Monsieur Grayson. Lead on, if you please. They followed Grayson through a marble-floored hall, its walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced Ashfords gazing down from gilded frames. A mahogany umbrella stand stood near the door, conspicuously empty, and Poirot's eyes lingered on it for a moment before he proceeded. The drawing room was a study in elegance, its high ceilings adorned with plasterwork, its furnishings a blend of antique oak and velvet upholstery. A fire crackled in the grate, casting a warm glow over the room, but the atmosphere was anything but welcoming. Lady Beatrice Ashford sat in a high-backed chair, her posture as unyielding as the oak it was carved from. She was a woman in her 60s. Her silver hair swept into a severe chignon, her grey eyes sharp and unyielding. Her black silk dress, relieved only by a cameo brooch at her throat, spoke of mourning, though Poirot knew her husband had died years ago. Beside her, on a low sofa, sat Margaret Langley, her auburn hair pinned neatly but her face pale and drawn, her hands twisting a handkerchief in her lap. "Mr. Poirot," Lady Beatrice said, her voice crisp as autumn frost, "I trust you understand the gravity of this situation. My umbrella, a priceless heirloom, has been stolen, and all evidence points to Miss Langley." Poirot bowed slightly, his expression one of polite deference. "Madame, I am Hercule Poirot, and this is my associate, Captain Hastings. I am here to seek the truth, which, I assure you, is rarely as simple as it appears. May I ask you to recount the events of the night in question?" Lady Beatrice's lips tightened, but she complied. "2 nights ago, I wished to inspect my orchids in the conservatory. It was raining, and Miss Langley carried my umbrella to shield me as we crossed the garden. She claims she left it by the door when we entered, but when she returned for it, it was gone. I find her story implausible. The umbrella is irreplaceable, a gift from my late husband, Sir Henry, its handle encrusted with rubies, its silk canopy embroidered with gold. No one else had reason to touch it." Margaret's eyes flashed with desperation. "I swear, Mr. Poirot, I left it by the door. I don't know what happened to it. I would never steal from Lady Beatrice." Poirot raised a hand, his gesture calming. "Mademoiselle, I believe in your sincerity, but let us proceed with order. Who else was in the house that evening?" Lady Beatrice answered before Margaret could speak. "My nephew, Gerald Ashford, was here, as was my ward, Clara Vernon. Dr. Simon Ridgway, our physician, was in his cottage on the estate, but dined with us earlier. The servants Grayson, Mrs. Whittaker, and the others were about their duties." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And this umbrella, madame, it was kept in the hall, accessible to all." Lady Beatrice nodded curtly. It was a point of pride. Mr. Poirot displayed as a testament to my husband's taste. "I never imagined it would tempt a thief." Curio Poirot murmured, his gaze drifting to the window, where the mist pressed against the glass. "I would like to meet the others, if I may, and to see this conservatory where the umbrella was last seen." Lady Beatrice rang a bell, and Grayson reappeared to summon the household. First to enter was Gerald Ashford, a lanky man in his 30s, with a sallow complexion and eyes that darted nervously. His morning coat was impeccably cut, but the cuffs were frayed, a detail Poirot noted with interest. "Mr. Poirot," Gerald said, his tone clipped, "I hope you can sort this mess out quickly. It's a damned nuisance." Poirot's smile was polite but probing. "Monsieur Ashford, where were you on the night of the theft?" Gerald shrugged, slouching into a chair. "At a club in town. Got back late around midnight, I'd say. Nowhere near the conservatory." Next came Clara Vernon, a striking young woman with golden hair and a haughty air. Her blue eyes assessed Poirot with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "I was in my room, reading," she said, in response to Poirot's question, her voice cool. "I had no interest in Lady Beatrice's umbrella." "And the title of this book, mademoiselle?" Poirot asked, his tone mild. Clara hesitated, her fingers smoothing her skirt. "A novel, Wuthering Heights, I believe." Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly, but he said nothing. Finally, Dr. Simon Ridgway entered, a bespectacled man in his 40s, with a nervous tic in his left cheek. "I was in my cottage after dinner," he said, his voice low. "I had Patience notes to review." Poirot nodded, his gaze sweeping the group. "A simple theft, yet so many alibis. I shall examine the conservatory now, if you please." Grayson led Poirot and Hastings through a series of corridors to the conservatory. A glass-walled structure filled with the lush scent of damp earth and blooming orchids. The tiled floor was spotless, the wicker furniture arranged with precision. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, pausing at the door leading to the garden. He crouched, his gloved fingers brushing the grout between the tiles, and retrieved a single, delicate petal pink, with a faint streak of violet mondier. He murmured, holding it to the light. "This petal, it is from a rare orchid, Nan. Not one grown in this conservatory." Hastings peered over his shoulder. "How do you know, Poirot?" "The hothouse, Hastings," Poirot said, pocketing the petal. "This comes from a plant kept under lock and key. Someone was careless." They stepped into the garden, where the mist hung heavy over the gravel paths and clipped hedges. Poirot's gaze followed the path to the distant hothouse, its glass walls barely visible. "We must speak with this gardener, Bates," he said, "and I must know more of this household, their secrets, their motives." As they returned to the drawing room, Poirot's mind was already at work, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. The crimson umbrella was more than a stolen heirloom. It was a symbol, a key to a deeper truth, and Hercule Poirot would uncover it, petal by petal. Chapter 3. The suspects assembled. The mist that cloaked Ashford Manor had thickened by mid-morning, lending the estate an air of secrecy, as though the very walls conspired to hide their truths. Hercule Poirot stood in the conservatory, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of a wicker table, his green eyes scanning the glass walls that shimmered with condensation. The faint scent of orchids lingered, mingling with the damp earthiness of the tiled floor. Hastings, at his side, shifted restlessly, his umbrella tucked under his arm, a poor substitute for the crimson heirloom that had vanished. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low, "that petal you found, do you really think it's significant? It could have been carried in on someone's shoe, couldn't it?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, his gaze never leaving the door that led to the garden. Mon ami, in the hands of Hercule Poirot, even a single petal is a chapter in the book of truth. This one, it is from a rare orchid, grown not here but in the hothouse. It tells me someone passed through that locked domain, and they were not careful. Carelessness, Hastings, is the thief's greatest enemy. Before Hastings could respond, the conservatory door creaked open, and Grayson, the butler, appeared, his expression as impassive as ever. "Mr. Poirot, Lady Beatrice requests your presence in the drawing-room. The household is assembled, as you wished." "Merci, Monsieur Grayson," Poirot said, adjusting his already immaculate cuffs. "Come, Hastings. Let us meet this cast of characters and see what their faces reveal." They followed Grayson back through the manor's labyrinthian corridors, the portraits of long-dead Ashfords watching their progress with unblinking eyes. The drawing room was much as they had left it, though the fire had been stoked, casting a warmer glow over the tense gathering. Lady Beatrice sat in her backed chair, her grey eyes fixed on Poirot with an intensity that suggested both curiosity and impatience. Margaret Langley perched on the sofa, her handkerchief now a crumpled ball in her hands, her auburn hair slightly dishevelled as though she had run her fingers through it in distress. Gerald Ashford lounged by the window, his sallow face half-turned to the mist-shrouded garden, while Clara Vernon sat primly in an armchair, her blue eyes cool and appraising. Dr. Simon Ridgway stood near the fireplace, his fingers twitching as though longing for something to occupy them. Poirot took his place at the centre of the room, his small stature commanding attention as effortlessly as a general on a battlefield. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and precise, "I am Hercule Poirot, and I am here to uncover the truth behind the disappearance of Lady Beatrice's crimson umbrella. It is a matter most curious, for an object of such value does not vanish without purpose. I ask for your cooperation, and I assure you, the little grey cells, they do not rest until the puzzle is solved." Lady Beatrice's lips tightened. "I trust you will be swift, Mr. Poirot. The longer this theft goes unpunished, the greater the stain on my household." Poirot inclined his head. "Madame, the truth requires patience, but it will not elude me. Let us begin with a simple question. Who among you saw the umbrella on the evening it disappeared?" A heavy silence descended, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Margaret's voice, trembling but resolute, was the first to speak. "I did, Mr. Poirot. I carried it to the conservatory for Lady Beatrice, as I told you. I left it by the door, just inside, propped against the wall. When I returned an hour later, it was gone." Poirot's eyes fixed on her, gentle but probing. "And this hour, mademoiselle, what occupied you during it?" Margaret flushed, her fingers tightening on the handkerchief. "I was with Lady Beatrice, tending to her orchids. She likes to check their progress daily, and I help her with the watering and pruning. We were together the whole time." Lady Beatrice nodded curtly. "Miss Langley speaks the truth. We were in the conservatory, discussing the care of my Cattleya. La Beata, I saw her place the umbrella by the door, but I did not see it again after we left." Poirot turned to Gerald Ashford, who was still gazing out the window, his posture suggesting a desire to be elsewhere. "Monsieur Ashford, you said you were at a club that evening, yet you returned to the manor around midnight. Did you pass through the hall, perhaps see the umbrella stand?" Gerald turned, his eyes narrowing. "I told you, I was nowhere near the conservatory. I came in through the front door, yes, but the stand was empty. I didn't think anything of it. Should I? It's just an umbrella, even if it's got a few baubles on it." Poirot's smile was polite but unyielding. "A few baubles, monsieur. Rubies and gold thread, they are not trifles. And your debts, they are well known in certain circles. A man in need of funds might see such an item as a solution, Nan." Gerald's face reddened, and he took a step forward, his fists clenching. "Are you accusing me, Poirot? I'll have you know I'm an Ashford, not some common thief." "Calm yourself, Gerald," Lady Beatrice snapped, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Mr. Poirot is merely doing his duty." Poirot raised a hand, his gesture conciliatory. "I accuse no one, Monsieur Ashford. I seek only the truth. Let us turn to Mademoiselle Vernon. You are reading, you said, in your room, yet you hesitated when I asked the title of your book. Why is this?" Clara Vernon's blue eyes met Poirot's with a flicker of defiance. I was tired that evening, Mr. Poirot. I may have picked up Wuthering Heights, or perhaps it was another novel. I don't keep a diary of my reading habits. Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly. Precision, mademoiselle, is the ally of truth. A mind as sharp as yours, it does not forget such details easily. Clara's lips parted, but she said nothing, her gaze dropping to her hands. Poirot turned to Dr. Ridgway, whose nervous tic had grown more pronounced. And you, doctor, you were in your cottage after dinner, yet you dined here, Did you pass through the hall, perhaps notice the umbrella? Ridgway adjusted his spectacles, his voice low and hesitant. I left through the front door after dinner, around 8 o'clock. The umbrella was in the stand then, I believe, but I paid it no mind. My work keeps me occupied, Mr. Poirot. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Very well, I think. You all for your candor. Now, I would like to speak with the gardener, Monsieur Bates, and examine the hothouse. The petal I found, it suggests a connection that must not be ignored. Lady Beatrice's eyes narrowed. The hothouse is locked. Mr. Poirot, only I and Bates have keys. Surely you don't suspect my gardener? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. I suspect no one, madame, and everyone. The little grey cells, they demand evidence, not assumptions. Grayson was dispatched to fetch Betts, and Poirot led Hastings back to the conservatory, his steps brisk despite the lingering dampness. In the air, what do you make of them, Poirot? Hastings asked, his voice low. Gerald's got a temper, hasn't he? And Clara, there's something she's not saying. Poirot paused by the conservatory door, his gloved fingers brushing the frame where the umbrella had last been seen. They all hide something, Hastings. Gerald's debts make him desperate, Clara's hesitation betrays a secret, and Dr. Nervousness suggests more than professional preoccupation. Even Lady Beatrice, with her pride, may know more than she reveals. And Margaret, her fear, it is genuine, but is it only for her reputation? Hastings frowned. You don't think Margaret's involved, do you? She's my cousin, Poirot, she's no thief. Poirot's eyes softened. I believe in her innocence, mon ami, but belief is not proof. We must follow the evidence, and this petalit is our first thread. The door opened, and Grayson returned with Bates, a wiry man in his 60s, with weathered hands and a face creased like old leather. His eyes, sharp and wary, assessed Poirot with the caution of a man accustomed to solitude. You wanted to see me, sir, he said, his voice gruff. Oui, Monsieur Bates, Poirot replied, holding up the petal. This, it is from one of your orchids, Nan. A rare variety, kept in the hothouse. Bates squinted at the petal, his expression guarded. Aye, that's from a phalaenopsis amabilis, one of Lady Beatrice's pride and joys. Kept under lock and key in the hothouse. Nobody's supposed to go in there without my say-so. And yet, Poirot said, his voice soft but insistent, this petal was found here, in the conservatory. Tell me, was the hothouse door locked on the night of the theft? Betts hesitated, his fingers brushing the brim of his cap. It was locked, sir, far as I know. I checked it myself that evening, around 7. But the key it's kept in the gardener's shed, and I don't always watch it like a hawk. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And could someone have taken this key without your knowledge? Bates shrugged, his discomfort evident. Possible, I suppose. But I'd have noticed if anything was disturbed in the hothouse. Those orchids are just go trampling through without leaving a mark. Yet a petal found its way here, Poirot murmured, pocketing the petal once more. Merci, Monsieur Bates. You have been most helpful. As Bates departed, Hastings turned to Poirot, his brow furrowed. What does it mean, Poirot? If the hothouse was locked, how did the petal get here? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. It means, mon ami, that someone entered the hothouse, perhaps in search of the umbrella, or perhaps for another purpose entirely. We must discover what lies hidden in that locked glass house. Come, let us return to the drawing room. I have more questions for our suspects. They re-entered the drawing room to find the household still gathered, the air thick with unspoken tensions. Poirot's gaze swept over them, his mind a whirl of possibilities. Madame, he said, addressing Lady Beatrice, this umbrella. It is more than a sentimental treasure, Nan. It holds a secret, perhaps. A hidden compartment, a message. Lady Beatrice's face stiffened, her grey eyes flashing. It is a work of art, Mr. Poirot, nothing more. Its value lies in its craftsmanship and my husband's memory. Poirot's smile did not waver. And yet, Madame, secrets have a way of revealing themselves. I shall find this umbrella, and with it the truth. As the mist thickened outside, Poirot felt the threads of the mystery tightening. The petal, the alibis, the nervous glances all, were pieces of a puzzle that only Hercule Poirot could solve. Chapter 4. The conservatory Clutha mist that enveloped Ashford Manor had grown denser by noon, cloaking the gardens in a ghostly veil that seemed to whisper secrets. Hercule Poirot stood once more in the conservatory, his gloved hands clasped. Behind his back, his green eyes scanning the glass-walled sanctuary with the intensity of a hawk. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming orchids, their delicate petals trembling in the faint draught from the garden door. Hastings, ever the faithful shadow, stood nearby, his umbrella tucked under his arm, his brow furrowed as he watched Poirot's methodical movements. Poirot, Hastings ventured, his voice hushed as though reluctant to disturb the stillness. You've been staring at that door for a good 10 minutes. What are you looking for? The petal was a clue, I grant you, but surely the umbrella's long gone by now. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, his gaze never wavering from the tiled floor near the door. Patience, mon ami. The scene of a crime for a theft is a crime, however small holds the truth like a mirror holds a reflection. The petal, it was our first glimpse, but there is more here, waiting for the little grey cells to uncover. He crouched, his movements precise despite the stiffness of his tailored suit, and examined the grout between the tiles. The petal he had found earlier had been a singular anomaly, but now his fingers brushed against something else, a faint smudge of dirt, barely visible, ground into the crevice where the door met the floor. Curio, he murmured, producing a small magnifying glass from his pocket. This dirt, it is not from the conservatory. It is darker, richer perhaps from the hothouse or the garden beyond. Hastings leaned closer, squinting at the smudge, dirt. But the servants clean this place daily, don't they? Could it have come from someone's shoe? Precisement, Poirot said, rising with a grace that belied his age. But whose shoe, Hastings? And why here, at the exact spot where Mademoiselle Langley claims to have left the umbrella? This dirt, it is a whisper of the truth, and we must listen. He stepped to the door, pushing it open to reveal the garden, where the mist hung low over the gravel paths and clipped hedges. The fountain at the centre burbled faintly, its sound muffled by the fog. Poirot's eyes followed. The the path that led to the distant hothouse, its glass walls a faint shimmer in the haze. "The hothouse," he said softly, almost to himself. "It calls to us, Hastings. But first, let us ensure we have missed nothing here." He turned back to the conservatory, his gaze sweeping over the wicker furniture, the neatly arranged pots of orchids, and the glass walls streaked with condensation. A small table held a pair of gardening gloves and a trowel, their handles worn but clean. Poirot paused, his fingers hovering over the gloves. These, they belonged to whom? Lady Beatrice, perhaps, or Mademoiselle Langley. Hastings shook his head. "Margaret mentioned Lady Beatrice does the pruning herself, but she always wears gloves. Those could be hers, or maybe the gardener's." Poirot lifted one glove, examining it under his magnifying glass. A faint trace of green powder clung to the fabric, barely perceptible. Chlorophyll, perhaps, he mused, or something more exotic. "The orchids, they require special care, Nan. We must ask Monsieur Bates about his methods." Before Hastings could respond, the conservatory door opened and Grayson appeared, his expression as impassive as ever. "Mr. Poirot, Lady Beatrice wishes to know if you require luncheon. She also asks that you refrain from disturbing the household further until necessary." Poirot's smile was polite but firm. "Merci, Monsieur Grayson. Please inform Madame that Hercule Poirot does not disturb without purpose. I would, however, speak with Monsieur Bates again, and I wish to visit the hothouse. The luncheon, it can wait." Grayson inclined his head and departed, leaving Poirot and Hastings alone. Once more, "You're rattling them, Poirot," Hastings said, a note of admiration in his voice. "Lady Beatrice doesn't strike me as the sort who likes being kept waiting." "Nor does Hercule Poirot," Poirot replied, his tone dry. "But the truth, it is a demanding mistress, and she will not be rushed. Come, let us walk to the hothouse. The petal and the dirt, they point us there." They stepped into the garden, the gravel crunching underfoot as they followed the path through the mist. The hothouse loomed ahead, its glass walls glistening faintly. A sanctuary of warmth and life in the cold grey air. As they approached, Bates emerged from a nearby shed, his weathered face set in a scowl. "Back again, sir," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "What's this about now?" Poirot held up the glove, the green powder catching the faint light. "This, Monsieur Bates, was found in the conservatory. It bears a trace of something, perhaps a fertilizer, perhaps something else. You are the guardian of Lady Beatrice's orchids, What do you use to tend them?" Bates squinted at the glove, his expression guarded. "That's one of her ladyship's gloves. She uses a special mix for the orchid's potassium and a bit of bone meal, nothing fancy. But I keep that locked in the shed, and nobody touches it but me." "And the Phalaenopsis amoebalis?" Poirot asked, his voice soft but insistent. "The petal I found, it came from your hothouse. Was the door locked on the night of the theft?" Betts hesitated, his fingers tightening on the rag. "I told you, sir, I locked it at 7. But the key's in the shed, and I don't always check it. Someone could have borrowed it, I suppose." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Borrowed, you say? And would you have noticed if an orchid was disturbed? A petal dislodged, perhaps?" Bates shrugged, his discomfort evident. "Those plants are delicate. If someone went blundering in, I'd see it: broken stems, crushed leaves. But I didn't check the hothouse till the next morning. Everything looked fine then." Poirot nodded, pocketing the glove. "Merci, Monsieur Bates. You may return to your duties." But tell me, have you seen anyone near the hothouse in recent days? Someone who should not be there?" Bates shook his head. "Nobody, sir. Just me and her ladyship, like always." As Betts retreated, Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression thoughtful. "The hothouse, Hastings, it is the key to this mystery. The petal, the dirt, the glove, they all point to someone who ventured where they should not. But why? To hide the umbrella, or to seek something else? They entered the hothouse, the air warm and humid, heavy with the scent of exotic blooms. Rows of orchids stood in neat pots, their petals a riot of color: pink, violet, white. Poirot moved carefully, his eyes scanning the shelves and the packed earth floor. Near the back, he paused, his magnifying glass hovering over a small disturbance in the soil, a faint footprint, barely discernible, its edges softened by the damp. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, pointing to the mark. "A shoe, not large, but not small. A woman's, perhaps, or a man with slender feet." And here he knelt, retrieving a single thread of crimson silk caught on the edge of a pot. It is from the umbrella, Nan." Hastings' eyes widened. "Good Lord. Poirot, you think the umbrella was hidden here?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Hidden, or sought. We must return to the house and question our suspects further. This thread, it is a whisper of the truth, and Hercule Poirot listens closely." They retraced their steps to the manor, the mist now thinning to reveal patches of grey sky. In the drawing room, the householder waited, their faces a mixture of curiosity and unease. Poirot held up the crimson thread, his voice calm but commanding. "Madame et messieurs, this thread, it is from the umbrella's canopy, found in the hothouse. Someone entered that locked sanctuary, and I will know who." Lady Beatrice's eyes narrowed. "The hothouse is my domain, Mr. Poirot. No one enters without my permission." "And yet," Poirot said, his gaze sweeping the room, "someone did. Mademoiselle Vernon, you were reading, you say, but your memory of the book is vague. Monsieur Ashford, your debts make you restless, perhaps bold. Dr. Ridgway, your cottage is close to the hothouse, convenient, Nan, and Mademoiselle Langley. Your fear, it is palpable, but is it only for your reputation?" Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Mr. Poirot, I swear I never went near the hothouse." Gerald's face darkened, but before he could speak, Clara rose, her voice sharp. "This is absurd. You're accusing us all, Mr. Poirot, with no proof but a scrap of thread and a bit of dirt." Poirot's smile was unruffled. "Proof, mademoiselle, is built piece by piece. The little grey cells, they see the pattern where others see only chaos. I shall find this umbrella, and with it, the truth." As the household dispersed, their unease lingering like the mist outside, Poirot turned to Hastings. "The hothouse, mon ami, holds more than orchids. Tomorrow we shall dig deeper into the soil and into the hearts of those who walk these halls." Chapter 5. A hidden motive. The afternoon light filtered through the mist, casting a pallid glow over Ashford Manor's gardens, where the hedges stood like silent sentinels in the damp air. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat draped over his arm, stood in the drawing room, his green eyes fixed on the portrait of Sir Henry Ashford above the mantel. The late baronet's stern face, framed by mutton-chop whiskers, seemed to watch the proceedings with disapproval. Poirot's mind, however, was far from the portrait. Turning over the clues, the orchid petal, the dirt smudge, the crimson thread, the faint footprint like pieces of a mosaic, yet to form a complete picture. Captain Hastings, seated in a velvet armchair, fidgeted with his cufflinks, his expression a mixture of impatience and curiosity. "Poirot," he said, breaking the silence, "you've been awfully quiet since we left the hothouse. That thread you found, it's proof the umbrella was there, isn't it? But who would hide it in such a place?" Poirot turned his lips, curving into a faint smile. "Mon ami, the thread tells us the umbrella was in the hothouse. But whether it was hidden or sought, that is the question. The motives, Hastings, they are the heart of this mystery. Each person in this household has a reason to act or to conceal. Today we shall uncover what lies behind their masks." Before Hastings could reply, the door opened, and Grayson, the butler, announced, "Miss Clara Vernon, sir, as you requested." Clara entered, her golden hair catching the light, her blue eyes cool but wary. She wore a pale green dress that accentuated her elegance, but her posture was stiff, as though braced for an interrogation. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice crisp, "I hope this won't take long. I have letters to write." Poirot gestured to a chair, his manner courteous but unyielding. "Mademoiselle Vernon, please be seated. Hercule Poirot does not detain without purpose. I wish to discuss the night of the theft and your activities." Clara sat, her hands folded primly in her lap. "I told you I was in my room, reading. I had no interest in Lady Beatrice's umbrella." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his fingers tapping lightly on his walking stick. You mentioned Wuthering Heights, but your hesitation, it was most revealing. A woman of your intelligence, mademoiselle, does not forget the book she reads. Tell me, what kept you so occupied that evening?" Clara's lips parted, then closed, a faint flush rising to her cheeks. "I was tired, Mr. Poirot. I may have picked up one book, then another. I don't see why it matters." "It matters," Poirot said softly, "because the truth is built on details. You are Lady Beatrice's ward, Nan. You live in her home, under her protection, yet Mademoiselle Langley tells my friend Hastings that you treat her with disdain. Why is this?" Clara's eyes flashed, her composure slipping. "Margaret is a servant, whatever she calls herself. She's always hovering, listening, meddling. I don't trust her." Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly. "Meddling, you say? In what way?" Clara hesitated, her fingers tightening on her skirt. "She's too familiar with Lady Beatrice, always whispering in her ear. I think she's after something, money, perhaps, or favor." Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but probing. "And you, mademoiselle, what are you after? Security, independence, or perhaps something more personal?" Clara's flush deepened, and she rose abruptly. "I don't know what you mean." "Mr. Poirot, if you're accusing me, say it plainly." Poirot raised a hand, his gesture calming. "I accuse no one, mademoiselle. I seek only the truth. You may go, but no. This Hercule Poirot sees what is hidden, and the truth, it will not remain so." As Clara swept out, her head held high, Hastings let out a low whistle. "She's a cool customer, Poirot. Do you think she's hiding something?" "Without doubt," Poirot replied, his gaze drifting to the window, where the mist had begun to lift, revealing the garden's stark outlines. "Her disdain for Mademoiselle Langley is not mere snobbery. There is fear there, Hastings, and fear is a powerful motive." The door opened again, and Grayson ushered in Dr. Simon Ridgway, whose nervous tic was more pronounced than ever. His spectacles glinted in the firelight, and his hands fidgeted as he took a seat. "Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice low, "I hope this is necessary. I have patients to attend to." Poirot's smile was polite but unwavering. "Doctor, your patients, they are fortunate to have your care, but the health of this household requires my attention. You were in your cottage after dinner, yet the hothouse is but a short walk from your door. Did you, perhaps, venture out that evening?" Ridgway's tic twitched violently, and he adjusted his spectacles. "I told you, I was reviewing notes. I had no reason to go to the hothouse. I'm no gardener." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, Docteur, the hothouse holds secrets. A petal, a thread, a footprint. They tell me someone was there. You are devoted to Lady Beatrice, Nan. Would you protect her, even at the cost of truth?" Ridgway's face paled, and he stood, his voice sharp. "I've done nothing wrong. Mr. Poirot, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." As Ridgway departed, Hastings turned to Poirot, his brow furrowed. "He's jumpy, isn't he? Do you think he's involved?" Poirot's fingers tapped his stick, a rhythm as precise as a metronome. "He is afraid, Hastings, but of what? Guilt, or something else? We must learn more of his connection to this household." Poirot rose, his movements brisk. "Come, mon ami, let us visit the library. Books, they are the silent witnesses of a house, and Mademoiselle Vernon's reading habits intrigue me." The library was a cavernous room, its walls lined with leather-bound volumes, their spines gleaming in the dim light. A heavy oak table stood at the center, strewn with papers and a single candle, its wax pooled in a silver holder. Poirot's eyes scanned the shelves, pausing at a copy of Wuthering Heights tucked among the classics. He pulled it down, flipping through its pages, and a small slip of paper fluttered to the floor. "Regardas, Hastings," he said, retrieving it. The paper was a letter, written in a hurried hand. "Meet me at the hothouse, midnight. We must speak." It was unsigned, but the ink was fresh, the paper crisp. Hastings' eyes widened. "Good Lord, Poirot, a secret meeting. Who wrote this?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "That, mon ami, is the question. The handwriting, it is delicate, feminine, perhaps, but we must not assume. Let us return to the drawing room and observe our suspects further." They found the household still gathered, the air thick with unspoken tensions. Poirot held up the letter, his voice calm but commanding. "Madame et messieurs, this was found in the library, in a book Mademoiselle Vernon claims to have read. It speaks of a meeting at the hothouse on the night of the theft. Who among you can explain this?" Clara's face paled, but she said nothing. Gerald's eyes darted to the letter, his jaw tightening. Ridgway's tic twitched, and he looked away. Lady Beatrice's voice cut through the silence. "Mr. Poirot, this is outrageous. My household is not a den of conspirators." Poirot's gaze swept the room. "And yet, madame, conspiracies thrive in silence. Someone wrote this note, and someone met at the hothouse. The umbrella, it was there, as the thread proves. I will find the truth, and it will not hide for long." As the household dispersed, their unease palpable, Poirot turned to Hastings. "The net tightens, mon ami. The note, the thread, the petal, they are threads in a tapestry, and Hercule Poirot will weave them into clarity." Chapter 6. The Gambler's Death. The late afternoon sun pierced the thinning mist, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of Ashford Manor. Hercule Poirot stood by the drawing-room window, his green eyes fixed on the garden, where the gravel paths gleamed faintly under the emerging light. The air within the room was heavy with the scent of beeswax and old wood, the silence broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. Captain Hastings, seated in a leather armchair, adjusted his tie, his expression a mixture of anticipation and unease. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low, "that letter you found in the library, it's a bombshell, isn't it? A secret. Meeting at the hothouse, the very night the umbrella vanished. Do you think Clara wrote it?" Poirot turned, his lips curving into a faint smile. "Mon ami, the letter is a thread in our tapestry, but it is not yet woven into the whole. The handwriting, it is delicate, but we must not leap to conclusions. Today, we turn our attention to Monsieur Gerald Ashford. His debts, they are a shadow over this household, and shadows often hide the truth." Hastings nodded, his brow furrowing. "Gerald's a bit of a bounder, from what Margaret says. Always short of cash, always at the races or the card tables. But stealing his aunt's umbrella, it's a bold move, even for him." "Bold or desperate," Poirot replied, his fingers tapping his silver-topped walking stick with a rhythm as precise as the clock's. "A man in debt is a man without choices. Hastings, let us see what Monsieur Ashford reveals when pressed." The door opened, and Grayson, the butler, entered, his posture as rigid as ever. "Mr. Gerald Ashford, sir," he announced, stepping aside to allow Gerald to slouch into the room. The nephew's sallow face was set in a scowl, his morning coat slightly rumpled, as though he had dressed in haste. His eyes, bloodshot and wary, darted between Poirot and Hastings. "Double quote, Mr. Poirot," Gerald said, his tone clipped. "I hope this won't take long. I've business in town this evening." Poirot's smile was polite but unyielding. "Monsieur Ashford, Hercule Poirot, does not detain without purpose. Please, be seated. I wish to discuss your activities on the night of the theft and your financial circumstances." Gerald's scowl deepened, but he dropped into a chair, crossing his arms. "I told you, I was at a club in London White's, if you must know. Got back around midnight. I didn't go near the conservatory or the blasted umbrella." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice soft but probing. "And yet, monsieur, your debts are well known. A man who owes thousands to bookmakers and card might see a ruby-encrusted umbrella as a solution, Nan." Gerald's face reddened, his fists clenching. "That's slander, Poirot. I'm an Ashford, not some petty thief. Yes, I've had a run of bad luck, but I wouldn't steal from my own aunt." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Bad luck, you say? Or bad choices? Tell me, monsieur, where were you between the hours of 8 and midnight? Your club, it is a place of many distractions. Were you perhaps in the company of someone who can confirm your presence?" Gerald hesitated, his eyes flickering to the window. "I was playing cards, baccarat mostly. Ask anyone at White's. They'll tell you I was there." Poirot's smile did not waver. "And yet, monsieur, you returned to the manor at midnight through the front door, where the umbrella stand stood empty. Did you notice anything unusual? A sound, a shadow, perhaps?" Gerald's jaw tightened. "Nothing. The house was quiet. I went straight to bed." Poirot nodded, his fingers resuming their rhythmic tap. "Very well, you may go, Monsieur Ashford. But know this, the truth, it is like a debt. It must be paid, sooner or later." As Gerald stormed out, his footsteps echoing in the hall. Hastings turned to Poirot, his expression skeptical. "He's lying, isn't he, about the club, I mean? He looked shifty when you pressed him." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Shifty, oui, but is it guilt, or merely resentment? We must verify his alibi, Hastings. A call to my friend, Chief Inspector. Japp will confirm whether Monsieur Ashford was indeed at White's." Before Hastings could respond, the door opened again, and Mrs. Whittaker, the housekeeper, entered, her severe black dress and starched apron lending her the air of a governess. Her grey hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her eyes, sharp and observant, assessed Poirot with a mixture of deference and suspicion. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice crisp. "Grayson said you wished to speak with the staff. I've been housekeeper here for 20 years, and I assure you, none of my people would steal from Lady Beatrice." Poirot inclined his head, his manner courteous. "Madame Whittaker, your loyalty is admirable. I seek only information. On the night of the theft, were all the servants accounted for? Did any leave their duties, perhaps to venture into the garden?" Mrs. Whittaker's lips pursed. The staff were where they should be. Grayson was in the pantry, polishing silver. The maids, Ellen and Jane, were cleaning the upstairs rooms. The cook was in the kitchen, preparing for the next day. I was overseeing the household accounts in my office. No one went near the conservatory, except Miss Langley and her ladyship. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "And the gardener, Monsieur Bates? He was not in the house, but perhaps you saw him in the garden." Mrs. Whittaker hesitated, her fingers smoothing her apron. "Bates keeps to himself. I saw him near the hothouse earlier that evening, around 6, tending to his plants. But after that, I couldn't say." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Mercy, Madame Whittaker. Your diligence is noted. One final question. Have you observed any tensions in the household? Disagreements, perhaps, between the family or staff?" Mrs. Whittaker's eyes flickered, but her voice remained steady. "This is a proper household, Mr. Poirot. We don't air our grievances. But Mr. Gerald, he's been short-tempered of late, always asking her ladyship for money. And Miss Vernon, she's not fond of Miss Langley, calls her an upstart, behind." Her back, Poirot's smile was enigmatic, most illuminating. "You may go, madame." As Mrs. Whittaker departed, Hastings leaned forward, his voice low. "She's a tough old bird, isn't she? But that bit about Gerald and Claret matches what Margaret said. Do you think they're working together?" Poirot's fingers paused in their tapping. "Together or against each other? That is the question, Hastings. Let us take a walk, mon ami. The garden, it may hold more secrets than the hothouse." They stepped into the garden, where the mist had lifted, leaving the air cool and sharp. The gravel paths crunched underfoot as they made their way toward the fountain, its marble basin glistening with moisture. Poirot paused, his gaze drawn to a small patch of earth near the path, where the gravel gave way to soft soil. A faint impression caught his ajar partial footprint, smaller than the one in the hothouse, but unmistakably fresh, its edges marked by a trace of crimson silk caught on a nearby thorn. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, kneeling to examine the find. "Another thread, Hastings, and another footprint. This one, it is smaller, more delicate. A woman's perhaps, or a man with a narrow foot." Hastings' eyes widened. Another clue from the umbrella. But how did it get here, so far from the hothouse? Poirot's smile was grim. "That, mon ami, is what we must discover." The umbrella, it was moved, perhaps more than once. Someone is playing a dangerous game. He carefully extracted the thread, placing it in a small envelope, and stood, his gaze sweeping the garden. "We must speak with Chief Inspector Japp, Hastings. Gerald's alibi, it must be confirmed, and quickly. And I wish to know more of Mademoiselle Vernon's movements. Her disdain for your cousin, it hides a deeper motive, I am certain." They returned to the manor, where Poirot placed a discreet telephone call to Scotland Yard. Japp, ever reliable, promised to check on Gerald's presence at White's, as they awaited his response. Poirot paced the drawing room, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The clock struck 5, its chimes a somber reminder of time's relentless march. J8pp, single quotes, as call came an hour later, his gruff voice crackling through the line. "Poirot, your man Ashford was at White's, all right, but not the whole evening. Left around 10, according to the doorman. Where he went after that, nobody knows." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he hung up. "Most interesting, Hastings. Monsieur Ashford, he returns earlier than he claims. Why, and where did he go?" Before Hastings could reply, a sharp cry echoed from the hall. They rushed out to find Margaret Langley, her face pale, clutching a small velvet box. "Mr. Poirot," she gasped, "I found this in my room, under my pillow. It's not mine, I swear." Poirot took the box, opening it to reveal a single ruby, its facets catching the light like a drop of blood. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his voice low. "A ruby, perhaps from the umbrella's handle. The plot, it thickens, Hastings." As Margaret trembled, her eyes wide with fear, Poirot's mind raced. The ruby, the thread, the petal, the footprints, they were pieces of a puzzle, and Hercule Poirot was determined to fit them together. Chapter 7. The Doctor's Secret. The evening shadows lengthened across Ashford Manor, the last rays of sunlight filtering through the tall windows of the drawing room, casting intricate patterns on the polished oak floor. Hercule Poirot stood by the fireplace, his small, fastidious frame silhouetted against the flickering flames, the velvet box containing the ruby resting on the mantel before him. Its single gem gleamed like a frozen drop of blood, a silent accusation that hung heavy in the air. Captain Hastings, seated in a nearby armchair, leaned forward, his face a mixture of concern and bewilderment. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice hushed, "that rubiette's from the umbrella, isn't it? But how did it end up in Margaret's room? Someone's trying to frame her, surely." Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his fingers tapping his silver-topped walking stick with a rhythm as precise as a heartbeat. "Mon ami, the ruby is a bold stroke in this game of shadows. It points to Mademoiselle Langley, oui, but too directly, too conveniently. A true thief does not leave such a glaring clue unless they wish it to be found. We must look deeper, Hastings, into the heart of this household." Before Hastings could respond, the door opened and Grayson, the butler, entered, his expression as impassive as ever. "Dr. Simon Ridgway, sir," he announced, stepping aside to allow the physician to enter. Ridgway's bespectacled face was pale, his nervous tic more pronounced than ever, and his hands fidgeted as though seeking refuge in his pockets. "Mr. Poirot," Ridgway said, his voice low and strained, "you wished to see me, I'm afraid." "I'm rather busy, patience, you know." Poirot's smile was courteous but unyielding. "Doctor, the health of this household is my concern, and it requires your attention. Please, be seated. I wish to discuss the night of the theft, and this," he gestured to the velvet box, "a ruby, found in Mademoiselle Langley's room. It is from the umbrella, Nen. Ridgway's tick twitched violently, and he adjusted his spectacles, his eyes darting to the box. I know nothing of it, Mr. Poirot. I was in my cottage, as I told you, reviewing notes. I had no reason to be near the conservatory or Miss Langley's room. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but probing. And yet, Docteur, your cottage is but a stone's throw from the hothouse, where we found a crimson thread and a footprint. And this rubaiyat suggests someone with access to the umbrella, someone who moves freely in this house. You are devoted to Lady Beatrice. Would you protect her, even at the cost of another's reputation? Ridgway's face flushed, and he stood abruptly, his voice sharp. That's preposterous. I'm a doctor, not a thief. I've served this family for years, and I'd never betray Lady Beatrice's trust. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his smile unwavering. Betrayal, Doctor, takes many forms. Tell me, what is your relationship with Mademoiselle Vernon? You dine here often. You are close to the family. Is there perhaps a personal connection? Ridgway's hands trembled, and he turned away, his voice barely audible. Miss Vernon is Lady Beatrice's ward. I treat her as I would any member of the household professionally. Poirot's fingers paused in their tapping, his gaze piercing. Professionally, oui, but the heart, it does not always obey the rules of duty. I observe, Doctor, and I see a man who is nervous, perhaps afraid. Of what? Guilt or love? Face drained of color, and he opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. Instead, he muttered a curt excuse and fled the room, leaving the door ajar. Hastings let out a low whistle. Good Lord, Poirot, you've got him rattled. Do you think he's in love with Clara? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Love, Hastings, is a motive as powerful as greed. But we must have proof. Come, let us examine the doctor's cottage. It is close to the hothouse, and it may hold secrets of its own. They stepped into the garden, where the air was cool and sharp, the mist now a faint haze under the fading sun. The path to Ridgway's cottage wound past the hothouse, its glass, walls glinting like a beacon in the twilight. The cottage itself was modest, a single-story structure of stone and ivy, its windows dark save for a faint glow from within. Poirot knocked, but there was no answer. With a glance at Hastings, he tried the door, which opened with a soft creak. Poirot, Hastings whispered, his voice urgent. Is this legal? We can't just barge in. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Mon ami, the truth does not wait for invitations. We shall be discreet, and we shall disturb nothing. The cottage was sparsely furnished, its walls lined with medical books and a single photograph of Lady Beatrice, framed in silver. A desk stood in the corner, its surface cluttered with papers and a locked drawer. Poirot's fingers, deft as a magician's, produced a small tool from his pocket, and within moments, the drawer yielded to his skill. Inside was a bundle of letters, tied with a ribbon, and a small vial of green powder. Its label faded, but legible. Potassium mixture. For orchids, mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, holding up the vial. The same powder as on the glove in the conservatory. And these letters let us see what they reveal. He untied the ribbon, revealing a series of notes in a feminine hand, not unlike the one found in the library. The first read, Simon, meet me at the hothouse, midnight. We must be careful. It was signed with a single initial. C. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he scanned the others, each more cryptic but intimate, hinting at a clandestine relationship. Hastings' jaw dropped. Clara, she's been meeting Ridgway in secret. But why the hothouse? And what's this got to do with the umbrella? Poirot's smile was grim. The hothouse, Hastings, is a place of secrets, not just orchids. These letters suggest Mademoiselle Vernon and the doctor share a bond, one they wish to hide. But the ruby, why place it in Mademoiselle Langley's room? To protect someone, or to destroy them? They replaced the letters and locked the drawer, leaving the cottage as they found it. As they stepped back into the garden, a figure emerged. From the shadows, Clara Vernon, her face pale, her eyes wide with alarm. "Mr. Poirot," she exclaimed, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" Poirot's expression was calm but unyielding. "Mademoiselle Vernon, I seek the truth. You were seen near the hothouse, were you not?" On the night of the theft, Clara's hands clenched, her voice sharp. "I told you, I was in my room. You have no proof otherwise." Poirot held up the vial, his gaze piercing. "This powder, Mademoiselle, matches that found on a glove in the conservatory, and a letter, signed with your initial, speaks of a meeting at the hothouse. The truth, it is close, and it will not be denied." Clara's face crumpled, and she turned away, her shoulders shaking. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I never meant any harm." Before Poirot could press further, she fled into the manor, her footsteps echoing in the dusk. Hastings turned to Poirot, his expression troubled. "She's frightened. Poirot, do you think she took the umbrella to protect Ridgway?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Protect or betray? That is the question, Hastings. The ruby, the letters, the powder, they weave a web, and we must find the spider at its center." They returned to the drawing room, where Lady Beatrice awaited, her grey eyes sharp with impatience. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice icy, "your methods are intrusive. Have you found my umbrella, or are you merely stirring up trouble?" Poirot bowed slightly, his smile unruffled. "Madame, the truth requires disturbance, like a pond stirred to reveal its depths. The ruby, it was found in Mademoiselle Langley's room, but I believe it was placed there to mislead. The true thief, they are clever, but not clever enough for Hercule Poirot." Lady Beatrice's lips tightened, but she said nothing. As the evening drew to a close, Poirot's mind raced, the clues petal, thread, footprint, ruby, letters forming. A pattern only he could see. The doctor's secret was a piece of the puzzle, but the full picture remained elusive, hidden in the shadows of Ashford Manor. Chapter 8. The orchid's tale. The twilight had deepened into a velvet darkness, broken only by the faint glow of lanterns along the paths of Ashford Manor's gardens. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the evening chill, stood before the hothouse, its glass walls reflecting the pale light like a beacon in the night. The air was sharp with the scent of damp earth and fading blooms, and the distant murmur of the fountain added a somber rhythm to the stillness. Captain Hastings, at his side, adjusted his scarf, his breath visible in the cool air, his expression a mixture of curiosity and unease. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low, "you're certain the hothouse is the key? That petal, the thread, the footprint, they all point here. But what are we looking for? The umbrella itself." Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his silver-topped walking stick tapping lightly on the gravel path. "Mon ami, the hothouse is more than a place of flowers. It is a vault of secrets, where the truth hides among the orchids. The petal, the thread, the footprint, the ruby, they are chapters in a story, and tonight we shall read another page." He pushed open the hothouse door, the hinges creaking softly as a wave of warm, humid air enveloped them. The interior was a jungle of green, with rows of orchids in full bloom, their petals glowing in shades of pink, violet, and white under the soft light of hanging lanterns, system lanterns. Poirot moved with the precision of a cat, his eyes scanning the rows of pots, the packed earth floor, and the shelves laden with gardening tools and fertilizers. The faint scent of the Phalaenopsis amabilis lingered, its delicate petals a reminder of the clue that had first drawn him here. "Regardus, Hastings," Poirot said, pausing by a shelf where a small jar of green powder stood, its label identical to the one found in Dr. Ridgway's cottage, the potassium mixture used for the orchids. "It matches the powder on the glove and in the doctor's drawer. This is no coincidence, Nan." Hastings peered at the jar, his brow furrowing. "But Bates said only he and Lady Beatrice used this stuff. If it's in Ridgway's cottage, does that mean he's been in here, tampering with the orchids?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Or perhaps, mon ami, someone wishes us to believe he has. We must speak with Monsieur Bates again, but first, let us examine this hothouse more closely." He moved deeper into the structure, his magnifying glass in hand, inspecting the soil and the pots with meticulous care. Near the back, where the footprint had been found, he paused, his gaze fixed on a cluster of orchids. One plant, its leaves slightly askew, bore a faint marker scratch on the pot's rim, as though something heavy had brushed against it. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers tracing the mark, and retrieved a tiny fragment of gold thread, glinting faintly in the lantern light. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, holding the thread to the light. "Another piece of the umbrella's canopy, Hastings. It was here, in this very spot, and recently." Hastings' eyes widened. "Good Lord, Poirot. You think the umbrella was hidden here, among the orchids. But why move it again?" Poirot's expression grew thoughtful. "Why, indeed? To hide it, or to retrieve it? The ruby in Mademoiselle Langley's room suggests a deliberate act to cast suspicion, perhaps, or to distract. We must learn who had access to this hothouse, and when." They stepped outside, the night air sharp against their skin, and made their way to the gardener's shed, where Bates was polishing a pair of pruning shears by the light of a single lamp. His weathered face tightened as he saw Poirot, his hands pausing in their work. "Back again, sir," Bates said, his voice gruff. "I've told you all I know about the hothouse." Poirot held up the gold thread, his voice soft but insistent. "Monsieur Bates, this thread, it is from the crimson umbrella, found among your orchids. The hothouse, it was locked, you say, yet someone entered. Tell me, was the key ever missing, even for an hour?" Bates' eyes narrowed, his fingers gripping the shears. "The key's always in the shed, sir, on a hook by the door. I locked the hothouse at 7 that night, like I said. But I don't stand guard over it. Someone could have taken the key, I suppose, and put it back before I noticed." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "And the orchids, Monsieur Bates, have any been disturbed? A pot moved, a leaf broken?" Bates hesitated, his expression guarded. "I checked them daily, sir. Nothing was out of place the next morning, except maybe that Phalaenopsis you mentioned. Its pot was turned a bit, but I thought I'd bumped it myself." Poirot's smile was faint but knowing. "A bump or a thief's carelessness? Merci, Monsieur Bates. You have been most helpful." As they returned to the manor, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice low. "He's hiding something, isn't he? That business about the key, it's too convenient." "Perhaps," Poirot replied, his eyes fixed on the Manor's looming silhouette. "But Betts, he is loyal to Lady Beatrice. If he conceals something, it is to protect her or himself. We must now confront the mistress of this house." They found Lady Beatrice in the library, seated at the oak table, a ledger open before her. Her silver hair gleamed in the candlelight, her grey eyes sharp as she looked up. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice icy, "your persistence is tiresome. Have you found my umbrella, or are you merely collecting scraps of thread and dirt?" Poirot bowed slightly, his manner unruffled. "Madame, the scraps, as you call them, are the threads of truth. This," he held up the gold thread. "It was found in the hothouse, among your orchids. The umbrella was there, and someone moved it. You, alone, with Monsieur Bates, hold the key to that sanctuary. Tell me, what is the significance of this umbrella, beyond its rubies and gold?" Lady Beatrice's face stiffened, her hands clenching the ledger. "It is a memento of my husband, Mr. Poirot, nothing more. Its value is sentimental, as I have told you." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his voice soft but relentless. "And yet, madame, it is a memento that inspires theft, secrecy, and fear. The ruby in Mademoiselle Langley's room, the letters in Dr. Ridgway's cottage, the thread in the hothouse, they suggest a secret you guard closely. What is hidden in that umbrella? A will, perhaps? A confession?" Lady Beatrice rose, her voice trembling with controlled fury. "You go too far, Mr. Poirot. My husband's memory is not to be trifled with. Find the umbrella, and leave my family's affairs alone." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The affairs of a family, madame, are the heart of this mystery. I will find the truth, and it will not remain hidden." As Lady Beatrice swept out, her black silk dress rustling like a storm, Hastings turned to Poirot, his expression troubled. "She's protecting something, isn't she? That umbrella, it's more than a keepsake." "Oui, Hastings," Poirot said, his gaze drifting to the candle, its flame flickering as though stirred by an unseen breath. "The umbrella, it is a key, not just to wealth, but to power. We must watch this household closely, for the next move will reveal the player." They retired to the guest quarters, the Manor's silence pressing around them like a living thing. As Poirot prepared for bed, his mind raced, weaving the clue petal thread, footprint, ruby. Let us into a pattern that grew clearer with each passing hour. The orchid's tale was one of secrecy and betrayal, and Hercule Poirot was determined to read its final chapter. Chapter 9. The trap is set. The night had draped Ashford Manor in a cloak of darkness, the stars obscured by a veil of clouds that promised more rain. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing room, his small frame silhouetted against the fire's dying embers, his green eyes gleaming with a quiet intensity. The velvet box containing the ruby rested on the mantel, a silent reminder of the mystery that pulsed through the household. Captain Hastings, seated in a leather armchair, sipped a brandy, his expression a mixture of anticipation and unease. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low, "that gold thread you found in the hothouse sits another nail in the coffin, isn't it? The umbrella was there, and someone moved it. But who, and why, plant the ruby in Margaret's room?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, his fingers tapping his silver-topped walking stick with a rhythm as steady as a metronome. "Me, the ruby, the thread, the petal, they are pieces of a puzzle, but the picture remains incomplete. The thief, they are clever, but not clever enough to escape Hercule Poirot. Tonight, we shall set a trap to draw them out." Hastings' eyes widened. A trap? What kind, Poirot? You can't mean to confront them directly. Poirot's smile deepened, his gaze drifting to the window, where the darkness pressed against the glass. Nan, Hastings, not a confrontation, but a test. The thief, they are driven by motive, greed, fear, or perhaps love. We shall offer them temptation, and the little grey cells they will observe. He turned, his voice brisk. Come, mon ami, we must prepare. I have a plan, but it requires the cooperation of Lady Beatrice and her household. They found Lady Beatrice in the library, seated at the oak table, a glass of sherry untouched before her. Her silver hair gleamed in the candlelight, her grey eyes sharp with impatience. Mr. Poirot, she said, her voice as cold as the night outside, your investigations disrupt my household. Have you found my umbrella, or are you merely collecting trifles? Poirot bowed slightly, his manner unruffled. Madame, the trifles, as you call them, are the threads of truth. The ruby, the gold thread, the orchid petal, they point to a secret within this house. But I propose a solution. Tonight, I shall place a replica of your crimson umbrella in the conservatory, where it was last seen. Let us see who comes to claim it. Lady Beatrice's eyes narrowed, her hands clenching the arms of her chair. A replica, you think, to lure the thief with a decoy. This is outrageous, Mr. Poirot. Poirot's smile was calm but resolute. Outrageous, perhaps, but necessary. The thief, they will not resist the chance to correct their mistake, I ask. Only for your permission to proceed, and the presence of your household to witness the trap. Lady Beatrice hesitated, her gaze flickering to the ruby on the mantel. Very well, she said at last, her voice tight. But if this fails, Mr. Poirot, I shall call the police and have Miss Langley arrested. Hastings bristled, but Poirot raised a hand, his expression serene. Mercy, madame. Now please summon the household. We must set the stage. Grayson was dispatched to gather the suspects, and within minutes the drawing room was filled with tense faces. Margaret Langley sat on the sofa, her auburn hair pinned tightly, her hands twisting a handkerchief. Gerald Ashford lounged by the window, his sallow face set in a scowl. Clara Vernon stood near the fireplace, her blue eyes cool but wary. Dr. Simon Ridgway hovered by the door, his nervous tick twitching violently. Bates, the gardener, stood apart, his weathered hands clasped before him, his expression guarded. Poirot took his place at the centre of the room, his small stature commanding attention. Madame et Messieurs, he began, his voice clear and precise. The theft of Lady Beatrice's crimson umbrella is a puzzle that demands a solution. Tonight, I place a replica in the conservatory, identical to the original in every detail. Ruby's gold thread, silk canopy. It will be there at midnight, unguarded. I invite the thief to reveal themselves, for Hercule Poirot sees all. A murmur of unease rippled through the room. Gerald's scowl deepened. This is absurd, Poirot. You think the thief's just going to walk in and take it? Clara's voice was sharp. It's a waste of time. The umbrella's probably long gone, sold to some dealer in London. Ridgway adjusted his spectacles, his voice low. I agree. This sounds like a theatrical stunt. Mr. Poirot. Margaret's eyes widened, her voice trembling. Mr. Poirot, I didn't take it. I swear. Please, you must believe me. Poirot's gaze swept the room, his smile enigmatic. Belief, it is not enough. Proof, it is the key. Tonight, We shall see who cannot resist the lure of the crimson umbrella. As the household dispersed, their unease palpable, Poirot turned to Hastings. We shall hide in the conservatory, mon ami, and watch. The thief, they will come, driven by fear or greed, and we shall be ready. The conservatory was dark, save for the faint glow of a single lantern, its light casting eerie shadows over the orchids and wicker furniture. Poirot and Hastings concealed themselves behind a screen of potted ferns, their breaths shallow in the humid air. The replica umbrella, crafted with meticulous care from Poirot's own resources, stood by the door, its ruby-encrusted handle glinting, its crimson silk canopy a beacon in the gloom. The hours ticked by, the silence broken only by the distant chime of the manor's clock. At precisely midnight, the conservatory door creaked open, and a figure slipped inside, their movements swift but cautious. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his hand gripping Hastings' arm to ensure silence. The figure approached the umbrella, hesitating, then reached for it with a gloved hand. Poirot whispered, stepping from the shadows, his voice sharp. "Halt, if you please." The figure froze, the lantern light revealing Clara Vernon, her face pale, her blue eyes wide with shock. The replica umbrella fell from her grasp, clattering to the tiles. "Mr. Poirot," she gasped, her voice trembling. I can explain." Poirot's expression was calm but unrelenting. "Explain, mademoiselle. Why do you come for this umbrella, knowing it is a trap?" Clara's hands clenched, her voice breaking. "I didn't steal it, I swear. I thought if I took the replica, I could prove it wasn't me. I wanted to protect someone." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Protect someone? Who, mademoiselle?" "Dr. Ridgway, perhaps. The letters in his cottage, they bear your initial." Clara's face crumpled, and she sank onto a wicker chair, her shoulders shaking. "It's Simon. He found something in the umbrella paper, hidden in the handle. He told me it was important, but he wouldn't say what. I was afraid for him, Mr. Poirot. I thought if I could make it look like the umbrella was still here, no one would suspect him." Hastings' jaw dropped. "Good Lord, Poirot. A paper in the umbrella. What could it be?" Poirot's gaze was piercing. "That, mademoiselle, is what we must discover. Where is Dr. Ridgway now?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "In his cottage, I think. He's been so worried, so afraid. Please, don't hurt him." Poirot's smile was gentle but firm. "Hercule Poirot does not hurt, mademoiselle. He uncovers. Come, Hastings, we must find the doctor." They left Clara in the conservatory, her sobs echoing in the darkness, and hurried to Ridgway's cottage. The door was ajar, the interior dark save for a single candle burning on the desk. A new clue caught Poirot's ajar small brass key. Lying on the floor, its surface etched with the initials S.H.A. Sir Henry Ashford, mon Dieu. Poirot murmured, pocketing the key. "The umbrella's handle, it has a lock, perhaps. The paper Mademoiselle Vernon speaks of it is the heart of this mystery." As they stepped back into the night, the clouds parted, revealing a sliver of moon. The trap had sprung, but the true thief remained in the shadows, and Hercule Poirot was determined to bring them into the light. Chapter 10. The Doctor's Confession. The night air was sharp with the promise of rain, the clouds overhead thickening as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings hurried along the gravel path to Dr. Simon Ridgway's cottage. The faint glow of the moon, now obscured, cast fleeting shadows over Ashford Manor's gardens, where the hedges loomed like silent conspirators. Poirot's silver-topped walking stick tapped a steady rhythm, his green eyes glinting with purpose as he clutched the small brass key etched with the initials SHAA, clue that pulsed with significance in his mind. Hastings, his breath visible in the chill, glanced at Poirot, his voice low. "Poirot, that key you found, do you really think it's for the umbrella? And Clara's story about a paper hidden inside, what could it be? A will, perhaps, like you suggested?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, his gaze fixed on the cottage's dark silhouette ahead. "Mon ami, the key, it is a door to the truth, and the paper, it is the heart of this mystery. Mademoiselle Vernon's fear, it is not for herself alone, but for the doctor. Tonight, we shall learn why." They reached the cottage, its stone walls draped in ivy, the single lit window casting a feeble glow. The door, still ajar from their earlier visit, creaked as Poirot pushed it open. The interior was dim, the air heavy with the scent of old books and candle wax. Dr. Ridgway stood by his desk, his bespectacled face pale, his nervous tick twitching violently as he turned to face them. A half-packed valise lay open on the floor, papers and clothing spilling from its edges. "Dr. Ridgway," Poirot said, his voice calm but commanding. "You prepare to leave, perhaps? A curious choice for a man who claims innocence." Ridgway's hands trembled, his spectacles slipping down his nose. "Mr. Poirot, I wasn't running, if that's what you think. I merely needed to organize my things." Poirot held up the brass key, its surface catching the candlelight. "This docture was found in your cottage, bearing the initials of Sir Henry Ashford. It is for the umbrella, Nan. And the paper Mademoiselle Vernon spoke of, what is it? Speak, for the truth will not wait." Ridgway's face crumpled, and he sank into a chair, his hands covering his face. "I didn't steal it, Mr. Poirot, I swear, but I know what's in it. I found it by accident, repairing the handle for Lady Beatrice last month. There's a compartment hidden in the shaft, and inside, a will." Hastings' jaw dropped. "A will, good Lord, Poirot, you were right." "Whose will?" "Sir Henry's." Ridgway nodded, his voice barely audible. "Yes, it's a codicil to his original will, written in his hand, dated a year before his death. It changes everything, disinherits Gerald and names Clara as the sole heir to the Ashford estate." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his fingers tightening on the key. "And you told Mademoiselle Vernon of this discovery? Oui. That is why she met you in the hothouse, why she tried to take the replica tonight to protect you." Ridgway's tick twitched, and he looked away, his voice breaking. "Clara, she was afraid for me. She thought if Gerald found out, he'd do something desperate. He's in debt, Mr. Poirot, two dangerous people. When the umbrella vanished, I hoped it was just a theft, not connected to the will. But then the ruby appeared in Miss Langley's room, and I knew someone was trying to shift blame." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but relentless. "And you, Doctor, did you take the umbrella to protect this secret? Or did you hide it in the hothouse, where we found the thread and the footprint?" Ridgway shook his head, his eyes wide with panic. "No, I never touched it after I repaired it. I told Clara about the will, yes, but I left the umbrella in the hall. I don't know how it got to the hothouse, or how the ruby ended up in Miss Langley's room." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Yet the powder, Doctor, the potassium mixture for the orchids, found in your drawer and on the glove in the conservatory. You have been in the hothouse, Nan." Ridgway's face paled further, his hands trembling. "I borrowed some powder from Bates, months ago, for my own plants. but I haven't been in the hothouse since. You must believe me." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "Belief, it is not enough. Proof, docture, is what Hercule Poirot seeks. Where is the umbrella now? And who placed the ruby in Mademoiselle Langley's room?" Ridgway's shoulders slumped, his voice a whisper. "I don't know, Mr. Poirot. I only wanted to protect Clara. She means everything to me." Hastings, unable to contain himself, blurted, "You're in love with her, aren't you? That's why you kept those letters." Face flushed, but he didn't deny it. "Yes," he said softly, "but I'd never hurt Lady Beatrice or this family. I've served them too long." Poirot nodded, pocketing the key. "Merci, docteur. Your confession, it is a step toward the truth. Remain here and speak to no one until I return." As they stepped back into the night, the first drops of rain began to fall, pattering softly on the gravel. Hastings turned to Poirot, his expression troubled. "A will, Poirot, that changes everything. Gerald's got a motive to steal it, too. Keep his inheritance. But why frame Margaret?" Poirot's eyes narrowed, the rain glistening on his hat. "Frame or distract? The ruby, it is too obvious, Hastings. The true thief, they wish to confuse us. We must return to the manor and speak with Mademoiselle Langley. Her fear, it may hold the final clue." They found Margaret in the drawing room, alone, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders, her face pale as she stared into the fire. "Mr. Poirot," she said, rising, her voice trembling, "have you found out who put that ruby in my room? I'm so afraid they'll think I'm guilty." Poirot's smile was gentle but firm. "Mademoiselle, fear is a shadow, and Hercule Poirot brings light. Tell me, have you seen anything unusual in the house, someone near your room, perhaps? Or in the hothouse?" Margaret hesitated, her hands twisting together. I saw Clara near my room that evening, before dinner. She said she was looking for a book, but she seemed nervous, hurried. And once, a few days before the theft, I saw Dr. Ridgway coming from the hothouse, late at night. I thought it odd, but I didn't say anything." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Most interesting, mademoiselle. And the umbrella, did you ever notice anything unusual about it? A weight, perhaps, or a sound when it was moved?" Margaret frowned, her brow furrowing. "Now that you mention it, it did feel heavier than an ordinary umbrella, but I thought it was the rubies. And sometimes, when I moved it, there was a faint rattle, like something loose inside." Poirot's smile widened. "The rattle, mademoiselle, it is the sound of truth. Merci, you have been most helpful." As they left the drawing room, the rain now falling steadily, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice urgent. "A rattle, Poirot. That must be the compartment with the will. But where's the umbrella now? And who's trying to pin this on Margaret?" Poirot's gaze was distant, his mind racing. "The umbrella, it is close, Hastings. The key, the will, the ruby, they point to a game of deception. Tomorrow, we shall unravel the final threads, and the thief will face the light of her." Poirot, the rain drummed against the manor's windows, a relentless rhythm that echoed the pulse of the mystery. As Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly to uncover the truth. Chapter 11. The final piece. The rain had returned with a vengeance, hammering the windows of Ashford Manor as though demanding entry. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing room, his small frame bathed in the firelight, his green eyes gleaming with the intensity of a man on the cusp of revelation. The brass key, etched with the initials S.H.A., rested in his gloved hand, its weight a silent promise of truth. "Captain Hastings," seated by the hearth, swirled a glass of brandy, his expression a mixture of anticipation and unease. Poirot Hastings said, his voice low, "That key it's for the umbrella's hidden compartment, isn't it? And the Will Ridgway mentioned it's the motive behind all this. But who took the umbrella? And why plant the ruby in Margaret's room?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, his fingers tapping his silver-topped walking stick with a rhythm as steady as the rain outside. "Mon ami, the key is indeed the final piece, but the puzzle is not complete until we place it in the lock. The petal, the thread, the footprint, the ruby, the letters, the will they are threads in a tapestry, and tonight, Hercule Poirot will weave them into clarity." Before Hastings could reply, the door opened, and Grayson, the butler, entered, his posture as rigid as ever. "Lady Beatrice and the household, sir," he announced, stepping aside to admit the assembled suspects. Lady Beatrice took her place. In her high-backed chair, her silver hair gleaming, her grey eyes sharp with impatience. Margaret Langley sat on the sofa, her auburn hair loose, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Gerald Ashford leaned against the window, his sallow face set in a scowl. Clara Vernon stood near the fireplace, her blue eyes wary, her hands fidgeting with her skirt. Dr. Simon Ridgway hovered by the door, his nervous tick twitching violently. Bates, the gardener, stood apart, his weathered hands clasped, his expression guarded. Poirot took his place at the centre of the room, his small stature commanding attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and precise. "The theft of the crimson umbrella is a mystery that has stirred this household, but the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot have unravelled its secrets. Tonight we shall reveal the truth." Lady Beatrice's voice cut through the silence, icy and imperious. "Mr. Poirot, I trust you have more than theatrics to offer. My umbrella is still missing, and Miss Langley remains the prime suspect." Margaret gasped, her eyes wide with fear. "I didn't take it, Mr. Poirot, I swear." Poirot raised a hand, his gesture calming. "Patience, mademoiselle. The truth, it is not served by haste. Let us review the facts. The umbrella, with its ruby-encrusted handle and golden silk, was taken from the conservatory 2 nights ago. A petal from a Phalaenopsis amabilis was found there, a crimson thread and a footprint in the hothouse, a ruby in Mademoiselle Langley's room, letters in Dr. Ridgway's cottage, and this," he held up the brass key, "a key to a hidden compartment in the umbrella's handle, containing a will that disinherits Monsieur Ashford and names Mademoiselle Vernon as sole heir." A murmur of shock rippled through the room. Gerald's face reddened, his fists clenching. "That's a lie. My uncle would never cut me out." Clara's eyes widened, her voice trembling. "I didn't know, Mr. Poirot. I only learned of the will from Simon Dr. Ridgway." Ridgway's tick twitched, and he stepped forward, his voice urgent. "It's true, Mr. Poirot. I found the will by accident, repairing the handle. I told Clara, but I never took the umbrella." Poirot's gaze swept the room, his smile enigmatic. "And yet, Docteur, the potassium powder in your cottage matches that on the glove in the conservatory. Mademoiselle Vernon, you tried to take the replica umbrella to protect your lover. Monsieur Ashford, your debts make you desperate, and your alibi at White's is incomplete. Mademoiselle Langley, the ruby in your room points to you, but too obviously, and Monsieur Bates, the hothouse. Key was accessible, yet you saw nothing." Bates shifted, his weathered face tightening. "I told you, sir, I locked the hothouse. I don't know how anyone got in. Poirot's eyes gleamed. But someone did, Monsieur Bates. And the umbrella, it was hidden in the hothouse, among the orchids, where the thread and footprint were found. The ruby, it was placed in Mademoiselle Langley's room to cast suspicion. The question is by whom? He turned to Lady Beatrice, his voice soft but relentless. Madame, you knew of this will, did you not? The umbrella, it was more than a memento. It was a safeguard, a secret you guarded for your husband's wishes. Lady Beatrice's face stiffened, her hands clenching the arms of her chair. You presume too much, Mr. Poirot. The umbrella is a treasure, nothing more. Poirot's smile widened. Nan, madame, it is a vault, and the thief, they sought not the rubies, but the will. Let us test this theory. He produced a small parcel from his coat, unwrapping it to reveal the crimson umbrella, its ruby-encrusted handle gleaming, its silk canopy pristine. A gasp echoed through the room. Margaret's hands flew to her mouth. Clara's eyes widened, and Gerald took a step forward, his face pale. Where did you find it? Lady Beatrice demanded, her voice trembling. Poirot's gaze was steady. In the hothouse, madame, hidden among the orchids, where I retrieved it this afternoon. The key, it unlocked the compartment, and the will, it confirms Mademoiselle Vernon. As Clara's voice broke. I didn't take it, Mr. Poirot. I only tried to protect Simon. Poirot nodded, turning to Ridgway. And you, Doctor, you confess to finding the will, but not to stealing the umbrella. Yet the powder in your cottage suggests involvement. Ridgway shook his head, his voice desperate. I didn't steal it. I only borrowed the powder. Months ago, Poirot's eyes turned to Gerald. Monsieur Ashford, your debts drove you to desperation. You learned of the will, perhaps, and sought to destroy it. Gerald's face twisted with fury. I didn't touch the damned thing. I'd never betray my aunt. Poirot's gaze softened, and he turned to Margaret. Mademoiselle Langley, your fear was genuine, but you saw Mademoiselle Vernon near your room, and you heard the rattle in the umbrella. Margaret nodded, her voice trembling. Yes, Mr. Poirot, I thought it was just the rubies. Poirot's smile was triumphant. The rattle, it was the will, hidden in the handle. And the thief, he turned to Bates, his voice sharp. Monsieur Bates, you are loyal to Lady Beatrice, none. Loyal enough to hide the umbrella, to protect her secret, and to place the ruby in Mademoiselle Langley's room to shift blame. Bates' face paled, his hands trembling. I didn't, sir. I locked the hothouse, like I said. Poirot's eyes gleamed. But the key, Monsieur Bates, it was taken from your shed, and the footprint in the hothouse matches your boots. You knew of the will, perhaps from Lady Beatrice, and you acted to preserve her control over the estate. Lady Beatrice rose, her voice icy. Enough, Mr. Poirot. Betts is loyal. He would never betray me. Poirot's smile was gentle but unyielding. Loyalty, madame, can lead to betrayal of another kind. Bates took the umbrella, hid it in the hothouse, and placed the ruby to protect you from Gerald's greed and Clara's inheritance. But the little grey cells, they see through the deception. Bates sank to his knees, his voice breaking. Did it for her ladyship. I heard Mr. Gerald talking about selling the estate to pay his debts. I couldn't let that happen. Lady Beatrice's face softened, her eyes glistening. Bates, you fool. I would have handled it. Poirot's gaze swept the room. The umbrella, it is returned. The will, it will be honored. And the truth, it is restored. As the household stood in stunned silence, the rain outside slowed to a gentle patter, as though the storm itself acknowledged Poirot's triumph. Chapter 12. Order restored. The dawn broke over Ashford Manor with a quiet majesty, the first rays of sunlight piercing the lingering clouds to cast a golden sheen across the wet lawns and manicured hedges. The rain, which had battered the estate for days, had finally relented, leaving the air fresh and sharp, as though cleansed of the secrets it had harbored. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing room, his small, fastidious frame impeccable in a charcoal suit, his green eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a puzzle solved. The crimson umbrella, its ruby-encrusted handle glinting in the morning light, stood in its rightful place in the mahogany stand by the door. Beside it, on the mantel, rested the brass key etched with SHA. A silent witness to the truth unveiled Captain Hastings, seated in a velvet armchair by the fire, sipped a cup of tea, his weathered face a mixture of relief and lingering astonishment. "Poirot," he said, setting his cup down, "you've done it again. Bets, of all people. I never would have suspected the gardener. But to frame poor Margaret with that ruby, what a desperate act. And all to protect Lady Beatrice's control over the estate." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, his fingers resting lightly on his silver-topped walking stick. Its rhythm paused for the moment. "Mon ami, desperation is a powerful force, but loyalty, it is even stronger. Monsieur Bates, he acted not for gain, but for devotion." The little grey cells, they saw the pattern, the petal, the thread, the footprint, the ruby, the key, the letters, the willand. They wove it into the truth. Hastings leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "But the will, Poirot, what happens? Now, if Clara's the heir, as the codicil says, where does that leave Gerald? And what about Margaret? She's been through the ringer, poor girl." Poirot's eyes twinkled, his voice soft but precise. "Patience, Hastings. The truth, it restores order, but it also reshapes it. Let us gather the household one final time, and all shall be made clear." The door opened, and Grayson, the butler, entered, his posture as rigid as the columns framing the hall. "Lady Beatrice and the household, sir," he announced, stepping aside to admit the assembled cast. Lady Beatrice took her place in her backed chair, her silver hair swept into a severe chignon, her grey eyes sharp but weary, as though the weight of the mystery had aged her overnight. Margaret Langley sat on the sofa, her auburn hair neatly pinned, her hands still but her face pale with lingering fear. Gerald Ashford stood by the window, his sallow complexion flushed with resentment, his hands thrust into his pockets. Clara. Vernon perched on an armchair, her blue eyes downcast, her golden hair catching the sunlight. Dr. Simon Ridgway hovered near the door, his nervous tick subdued, his spectacles glinting faintly. Bates, the gardener, stood apart, his weathered face bowed, his hands clasped as though in supplication. Poirot took his place at the centre of the room, his small stature commanding attention as effortlessly as a conductor before an orchestra. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and resonant. "The case of the crimson umbrella is solved, and order is restored to Ashford Manor. But the truth, it demands explanation, and Hercule Poirot shall provide it." Lady Beatrice's voice was icy, her hands clenching the arms of her chair. "Mr. Poirot, you have returned my umbrella, but at what cost? My household is in disarray, and my trust betrayed. Explain yourself, and quickly." Poirot bowed slightly, his manner unruffled. "Madame, the truth is rarely gentle, but it is necessary. Let us retrace the threads of this mystery. The umbrella, a priceless heirloom with rubies and gold thread, was taken from the conservatory 2 nights ago. A petal from a Phalaenopsis amabilis was found there, a crimson thread and a footprint in the hothouse, a ruby in Mademoiselle Langley's room, letters in Dr. Ridgway's cottage, a key with Sir Henry's initials, and a will hidden in the umbrella's handle. Each clue, it pointed to a different hand, but the little grey cells, they saw the pattern. He turned to Bates, his gaze gentle but unrelenting. Monsieur Bates, you are the key to this puzzle. Your loyalty to Lady Beatrice, it drove you to act. You knew of the will, perhaps from overhearing Dr. Ridgway's conversation with Mademoiselle Vernon, or from Lady Beatrice herself. You feared its discovery would ruin the estate, for Monsieur Ashford's debts threatened its future. You took the umbrella from the conservatory, hid it in the hothouse among the orchids, and placed the ruby in Mademoiselle Langley's room, to cast suspicion on her. Bates' shoulders slumped, his voice a hoarse whisper. I did it for her ladyship, sir. Mr. Gerald, he's been talking of selling the manor to pay his creditors. I couldn't let that happen. The umbrella, I thought. If it was gone, the will would stay hidden. Lady Beatrice's face softened, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Betts, you foolish man, I would have found another way. Poirot nodded, his gaze turning to Gerald. Monsieur Ashford, your debts made you a suspect. But your absence from White's that night was not to steal the umbrella, but to meet with your creditors, You knew nothing of the will until now. Gerald's face reddened, but he nodded curtly. I've been a fool, Poirot, but not a thief. I'd never touch my aunt's things. Poirot's eyes shifted to Clara and Ridgway. Mademoiselle Vernon. Dr. Ridgway, your secret meetings in the hothouse were driven by love, but also by fear. You, Docteur, found the will while repairing the umbrella's handle. You told Mademoiselle Vernon, hoping to protect her inheritance. But you did not steal the umbrella, though the potassium powder in your cottage suggested otherwise. Ridgway's tick twitched faintly, his voice low. I only wanted to protect Clara. I never meant for any of this. Clara's voice trembled. Her hands clasped tightly. I tried to take the replica to prove we were innocent, Mr. Poirot. I was so afraid for Simon. Poirot's smile was gentle. Fear, it clouds the judgment, but love, it reveals the heart. You are not guilty, mademoiselle, but you were careless with your secrets. He turned to Margaret, his expression softening. Mademoiselle Langley, you were the victim of this deception, the ruby placed to divert suspicion. Your honesty, it guided us to the truth. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, her voice steady despite her emotion. Thank you, Mr. Poirot. I was so frightened, but you believed me. Poirot's gaze returned to Lady Beatrice. Madame, the will, it is now in your hands. It names Mademoiselle Vernon as heir, but you knew this, did you not? You guarded the umbrella, not just for sentiment, but for control. You allowed Betts to believe his actions protected you, but you suspected the truth. Lady Beatrice's lips tightened, but she nodded slowly. I suspected the will's existence, Mr. Poirot. Henry was a secretive man, and I knew he favored Clara, but I could not bear to see my family torn apart. I was wrong to let this go so far. Poirot's smile was triumphant. The truth, it restores order, madame. The umbrella is returned, the will is revealed, and the estate's future is yours to decide. He gestured to the umbrella, its rubies catching the sunlight. This, it is more than a treasure. It is a symbol of trust, now restored. The room fell silent, the weight of the revelation settling over the household. Grayson, ever discreet, stepped forward. "Shall I serve breakfast, my lady?" Lady Beatrice nodded, her voice softer. "Yes, Grayson, let us move forward." As the household dispersed, their faces a mixture of relief and resolve, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice low. "You've done it, Poirot, but what happens to Bates and the will?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, his stick tapping lightly on the floor. "Monsieur Bates, he will face Lady Beatrice's justice, but I suspect her mercy will prevail. The will, it is for the courts to decide, but Mademoiselle Vernon's future is secure. And we, mon ami, shall return to London, where order awaits." They stepped into the hall, the sunlight streaming through the windows, the manor's shadows dispelled at last. As they boarded the waiting car, Poirot's mind lingered on the crimson umbrella, its secrets unveiled, its story complete. The little grey cells, they had triumphed once more, and Hercule Poirot was content. The end.